The promenade on Helix station smelled like recycled air and something the humans called coffee. Soli had never tasted it, but she had memorized the way every human who drank it held their cup close to the chest, like something precious, like something that might be taken away. She sat on the railing above the main walkway, her tealand gold scales catching the pale light of the binary stars through the observation glass. Her wings, too big for her small body, were folded tight against her back. Her amber eyes moved slowly across the crowd below. A woman in a grey uniform passed under her. Soli felt the lock happen the way she always did, a quiet snap deep behind her eyes, like a key turning. Face stored. Name, Petra Home, engineer, third rotation, always tired on the left side of her face. Smelled faintly of machine oil no matter how many times she washed. A tall man with a shaved head. Snap. Stored. He had laughed loudly at something 3 weeks ago, and Soli had felt the vibration of it from 40 feet away. Soli did not choose to do this. The face-locking was something her body did on its own, the same way breathing was something theirs did. The Velhari were built for it. Her species had served as witnesses and archivists for 6,000 years. They remembered everything they saw, and they saw everyone clearly. Every human on Helix station had been locked inside her since her first week. 341 faces, each one permanent, each one complete. She loved them, she had not expected to. When she arrived 12 years ago, she thought humans would be like any other species, memorable but distant. Instead, they had given her a name on her first day. They had brought her small pieces of food to try. They had argued over which one of them she liked best with the same intensity they argued over everything else, which was considerable. Director Orin Fell appeared from the administrative corridor. Soli dropped from the railing without a sound and landed on his left shoulder. "Morning report," she said. Fell did not break his stride. "You're not required to give one. Engineer Home has not slept properly in 6 days. Her work is still accurate, but she is slower. The new fuel calibration team has a disagreement that has not been spoken out loud yet. It will be spoken loudly within the week." She paused. "Also, someone left a food container in Corridor 7, and it is affecting morale in a way no one has formally complained about." Fell sighed. "I'll deal with the container. I have already dealt with it." He smiled. She felt the warmth of it without needing to see it. She had his face locked in perfect detail, down to the small scar on his chin he got from a fall when he was 9 years old. He had told her the story himself. They walked together through the promenade, Soli riding his shoulder, the humans around them nodding or waving. Commander Will Ostara passed them going the opposite direction and pointed 2 fingers at Soli, which was his version of a greeting. She tilted her head in return. Then she saw him. He was coming from the service corridor on the lower level, a man in a technician's uniform, carrying a toolkit, walking with the calm, unhurried movement of someone who had a task and was going to do it. Medium height, brown hair worn short, nothing particularly striking about him. Soli felt the pull. Her biology reached toward him the way it always did, that automatic reach toward a new or unregistered face, building the lock. "Nothing." She blinked, turned her head to get a better angle. The man glanced up as he passed below, caught sight of her, gave a small nod, the kind humans gave to animals they did not want to startle, and kept walking. The lock had not happened. Soli stared after him. She could see him clearly. She could see the exact line of his jaw, the slight squint he used in brighter light, the way he shifted the toolkit to his other hand. She could see all of it. But none of it stayed. It was like trying to hold water in a closed fist. The moment she thought she had it, it was gone. Soli, Fell had stopped walking. He was looking at her. "You've gone very still." "That man," she said, "the technician, who is he?" Fell looked. "Aldrich Vane, been here 4 years. Good worker, quiet, never causes problems." He tilted his head. "Why?" Soli did not answer immediately. She was still watching the space where Aldrich Vane had been, as though he might have left some trace of himself on the air. "I do not have him," she said. Fell frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean I do not have his face." she finally looked at Fel. I have tried 17 times. The director was quiet for a moment. He knew what face-locking meant for Velhari. He knew that it was not a choice, that it was not something Soli could simply decide to do or not do. It happened, or it did not. In 12 years, it had never not happened with a human. 17, he repeated. 17, Soli confirmed. Her wings shifted against her back, the small restless movement she made when something was wrong. He has walked past me 17 times, Oren. I have seen his face clearly each time, and every time it is gone before it finishes. Fel looked down the corridor where Aldrich had disappeared. That's strange, he said quietly. Yes, said Soli. She settled her wings. I am going to figure out why. There is a small alcove on the upper east side of Helix station where the ventilation system runs warm and the glass curves outward just enough to see both stars at once. Soli had claimed it years ago. No one argued with her about it. Humans were generally good about not arguing with small creatures who had amber eyes that did not blink very often. She sat there now, watching the corridor below, waiting. She had learned Aldrich Vane's schedule in 3 days. It was not difficult. She simply waited and paid attention, which were the two things she did best. He worked the morning relay shift, which meant he moved through the east maintenance corridor at the same time every day, carrying the same toolkit, stopping at the same junctions. He was, she noted, very precise, very consistent. He came around the corner right on time. Soli fixed her gaze on him and held very still. The pull began. She felt her biology reach toward his face the way it always did, that automatic gathering motion, that long breath before the lock. Gone again, clean and total, like he had never been there. She made a sound low in her throat that no human would have recognized as frustration, but it was. She tried 4 more times that week. Different distances, different angles. Once she got close enough that she could hear him breathing as he worked. She stared at the side of his face for a full 2 minutes while he ran a calibration check on a relay panel. Nothing logged. On the 8th day, Nira Doss found her. Nira was the station's xenobiologist, a small energetic woman with short hair and the habit of arriving wherever she was going at a near run. She dropped into the alcove beside Soli, pulled out a data pad and said, Fel told me, I want to run tests. I am not sick, Soli said. I didn't say you were, I said I want to run tests. Nira was already pulling up equipment schematics. I want to put a biosensor array on you and watch your empathic centers in real time while you attempt the lock. See what's actually happening in there. Soli looked at her. She had Nira's face locked from their very first meeting 9 years ago in the docking bay. Nira had been the first person on the station to speak to her in formal Velhari, badly pronounced, but genuinely learned. Soli had locked her face and then felt something additional settle in, a warmth that was not part of the biological process. She had not told Nira this. It did not seem necessary. Fine, Soli said, but I want to know what you find immediately. Obviously, said Nira and smiled. The sensor array was small enough to sit between Soli's wing joints without interfering with movement. 3 days later, they positioned themselves where Aldrich would pass, and Nira watched the readings while Soli attempted the lock. The results were clear. Soli's empathic centers activated exactly as they should. The face lock process began correctly, and then, at the point where the lock should have finalized, where the face should have snapped into permanent storage, the signal simply dissipated, not blocked, not rejected, just gone, like a wave that never reached the shore. Nira stared at her screen for a long time. It's not you, she said finally. There's nothing wrong with your face lock system. It's working exactly right. Something on his end is dispersing the signal before it can complete. Soli already suspected this. It did not make her feel better. I need to talk to him, she said. Nira looked up. Soli. I am going to talk to him, not about this. Just to him, she paused. I want to try something. She found Aldrich in the lower maintenance bay, eating a meal alone at a small table near the tools storage wall. He looked up when she approached, and she saw the brief flicker of surprise that most humans had the first time a Valhari walked directly toward them with clear intent. She stopped 2 feet away from him. "You are Aldrich Vane," she said. "I am," he said carefully. "I am Sully. I live on this station." "I know who you are." There was something gentle in the way he said it. He set down his utensil. "I've seen you around, on the railings." He paused. "You've been watching me." It was not an accusation. His voice was even, like a person who had long since made peace with things being slightly strange. "Yes," Sully said. "I apologize if it was uncomfortable." "It wasn't." He tilted his head, and Sully studied his face with everything she had. "Can I ask why?" She was quiet for a moment. She decided honesty was simplest. "My species has a biological process called face locking. When I meet a person, my mind stores their face permanently. I have done this with every human on this station." Aldrich waited. "I cannot do it with you," she said. "I have tried many times. Your face will not stay." He was quiet for a moment. Then, to her genuine surprise, the corner of his mouth moved upward. "That's new," he said, not unkind, more like a man who had just been given a very unusual piece of information about himself and was deciding what to do with it. Sully stared at him. She reached for the lock one more time, automatically, uselessly. "Nothing. I will figure it out," she told him. It came out with more feeling than she intended. Aldrich looked at her for a moment, and there was something in his eyes she could not name, something quiet and old, like he had heard versions of the opposite his whole life and was not sure what to do with this. "Okay," he said simply, "let me know if I can help." The shuttle from the Valhari Council arrived without warning, which was typical. The Valhari considered announcements a form of performance, and performance a form of dishonesty. They simply appeared at the docking bay one morning, 3 elder Valhari in grey travel wraps, their scales the pale silver that came with age, their eyes the deep amber of very old things that had seen more than they had chosen to. Sully felt them before she saw them. She was on the promenade railing when the particular stillness that Elder Valhari carried moved through the station like a pressure change. She spread her wings once, folded them again, and went to meet them. The eldest was named Sovan. He had trained Sully when she was very young, back on the Humwald, before she requested the Helix posting. He looked at her the way he always had, with the careful attention of someone reading a text they already knew but checking for errors. "You have 341 faces," he said, not a greeting, a statement. "Yes," Sully said. "For one species." "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment. The other 2 elders stood behind him in the particular stillness that meant they were watching everything and saying nothing. "This is not what we sent you here to do," Sovan said. "A Valhari archivist observes, records, we do not collect, especially not like this. I did not choose to collect them, it happened. And yet it has happened 341 times, and not once with any of the other species on this station." He tilted his head. "The humans are affecting your process, Sully. This is contamination." She felt the word like a small impact. "It is not. We will need to review your case. There may need to be a purging." Sully went very still. A purging was not painful technically, but it was a removal, an erasure of stored faces done through a low-frequency resonance process that disrupted the locked memories until they broke apart. It was used for Valhari who had locked faces they should not have, criminals, the dead, those who needed to be forgotten for legal reasons. It was not done to faces that had been locked honestly. She said nothing, but something of what she felt must have shown, because Sovan looked at her for a long moment before looking away. Director Fell arrived at the docking bay 6 minutes later, which told Sully that someone had commud him the moment the Valhari shuttle appeared. He was not running. He walked with the specific controlled speed of someone who was angry and not intending to show it. Commander Ostara was with him, which Sully had not expected. Fell introduced himself to Sovan with diplomatic correctness and then said, without pausing, You're here about Sully. We are here about a Volhuri archivist who may be compromised, Sovan said. She's not compromised. Fell's voice was very calm. She's the most reliable source of accurate crew information on this station. She has helped us prevent 3 interspecies conflicts in the last 2 years because she pays attention to people and cares what happens to them. That's not contamination. Sovan looked at him with the particular expression that Elder Volhuri had when a non-Volhuri said something they found naive. Ostara said, "If you're thinking about a purging, you should know that's going to be a problem." "Commander," Fell said quietly. "No, they should know." Ostara crossed his arms. He was a large man and he used it thoughtfully. "This crew considers Sully family. You start erasing her memories of them, you're going to have 341 very unhappy people, and that's before you count the ones who have only met her a few times but still feel the same way. You don't want that kind of morale event on a diplomatic posting." Sovan looked between them. Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but recalculating. Sully watched all of this from 6 feet away. She watched these humans, whose faces she carried like photographs in a permanent archive, stand in front of 3 of the most senior members of her species and argue for her, without being asked, without hesitating. She did not have a word for what she felt. She had been considering, for several weeks, writing a formal request to the Volhuri Linguistic Council to create one. Later, when the elders had been escorted to their quarters and Fell was filling out the diplomatic incident paperwork, with the resigned efficiency of a man who had done it before, Nara found Sully on the railing. "They're not going to get the purging approved," Nara said. She sat down on the bench below the railing, close enough that they were almost level. Fell already commanded the council's own liaison office. "There's a counter-filing." Sully looked down at her. "You all moved very fast." "We've been worried since you told us about the summit visit last week." Nara shrugged. "We had a plan ready." "You had a plan." Fell had a plan. Ostara had a backup plan. I had a third plan in case both of those failed, which mostly involved scientific publications making a purging look very bad academically. She smiled. "We are human. We make plans." Sully was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I need to tell you something about what my research found, about Aldrich." Nara looked up. "The readings," Sully continued carefully. "I think the answer is not in me. I think it is in him, and I think it goes back much further than either of us." Nara's eyes sharpened the way they did when something had just become very interesting. "Tell me," she said. Nara had a way of presenting information that made it feel like the ground was shifting under you, not because she was dramatic, but because she was precise. She laid the facts down one at a time, like tiles, and by the time you saw the full picture you had already lost the ability to be surprised, because each piece had been reasonable and the conclusion had simply arrived. She had requested a closed session. Director Fell was there, Commander Ostara, the 3 Elder Volhuri, Sully on the table at the front of the room because no one had offered her a chair and she preferred the table anyway. Nara started with the sensor readings. She showed them the moment of the failed lock, the activation, the reach, the dissipation. She showed it 6 times from 6 different attempts, and they all looked identical. Then she pulled up a genetic record. "Aldrich vein carries a neurological variant," she said. "It is rare in the current human population, roughly 1 in 40,000. It produces what we call a resonance dampening field. His neural activity emits a signal that interferes with empathic and telepathic reads. Not strongly, most species would not notice it, but Volhuri face locking is extremely sensitive." Sovan leaned forward slightly. "You are saying his neurology is disrupting her process." "I am saying that his neurology is speaking to her biology in a language her biology recognizes." Nira brought up a second set of records. "These are fossil records, pre-contact Volhuri archaeological data sourced from the Open Council archive. This marker, the resonance dampening signal, appears in fossilized tissue samples of a prey species that Volhuri ancestors hunted during the early period." The room was very quiet. The prey animals that carried this marker were not invisible, Nira continued. They were simply not memorable in a biological sense. Velhari would encounter them, interact with them, and then the memory would not fully consolidate. It was an evolutionary advantage. Animals that the predator did not remember clearly were harder to track. Over thousands of years, the Velhari brain developed an automatic response to that signal. Begin the face lock process, and then do not complete it. Treat the face as transient. She paused. Aldrich's genome is, completely by accident, producing a version of that signal. When Soli attempts to lock his face, her biology receives the old instruction, this is not real, do not keep it. Silence. One of the junior elders said something very quietly in formal Velhari that Soli's translation instinct processed as roughly. That is not possible. Savan said nothing, he was looking at Soli. She was looking at the genetic record on Nira's screen. The purging argument, Fel said carefully, becomes somewhat complicated now. This is not a failure on Soli's part. This is a biological edge case created by two species meeting that, historically, never would have. Yes, said Nira, and the implications for Velhari human contact protocols are significant. We should probably. Later, said Soli. Everyone looked at her. Later, she said again quietly, I need to talk to him. She found Aldrich at the large observation viewport on the station's outer ring. It was a quiet part of the station in the evening rotation. He was there alone, the way she had started to notice he often was, not unhappily, just comfortably. He was the kind of person who had learned to be comfortable alone, because alone was what he usually got. She landed on the railing beside the viewport, and he glanced over at her. He had grown used to her appearing near him. He did not startle anymore. You look like you found something, he said. We did, she said, and she told him. He listened without interrupting. He was good at listening. She had noticed this from their first conversation. He did not fill silences, did not try to redirect. He just absorbed what was said and sat with it. When she finished, he was quiet for a while. So my brain is accidentally telling you I don't exist, he said, not upset, thoughtful. Your brain is accidentally speaking in a language my biology is very old, she said, old enough to have forgotten what it originally meant. He nodded slowly. He looked out at the stars. The binary pair were close tonight, the smaller one visible as a pale disk just beside the larger. She had watched him look at them before. He did it the way humans did when they needed to think. I've always been the person people didn't quite remember, he said. My name gets left off lists. People I've worked with for years sometimes forget I was there. I used to think there was something wrong with me. He paused. I just didn't know it was this specific. Soli was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I do not have your face, Aldrich Vane. My biology will not let me keep it. Every time I try, it is gone before it finishes. She stopped. Then she kept going because it was true and she had decided truth was better than silence. But I have your voice. I have the way you hold your toolkit. I have the small sound you make when a relay is 2 fractions off calibration and you are the only one who noticed. I have every word you have said to me. My face lock did not take. But you are in me, in all the other ways. He turned to look at her. She did not look away. He said, very quietly, that might be the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. They stayed at the viewport for a long time after that, not talking, watching the binary stars, the small dragon and the man who could not be remembered, both of them present and real in the light. Behind them, 3 elder Velhari formally withdrew the purging order before the session had even officially closed. No one mentioned it to Soli. It did not seem like the right moment. 6 months passed the way time on a space station does, in rotations and shift changes, in the gradual rearrangement of small things. A new crew of engineers arrived. An old medic retired and went home to a planet whose name Soli had memorized before the woman had even finished saying it. 3 new faces locked themselves into her permanent record before those people had time to unpack their quarters. 344 now. Aldrich remained unlocked. The ritual had developed without either of them planning it. Sometime in the second month after the viewport conversation, it had simply become a thing that happened. Soli would find him somewhere, the maintenance bay, the east corridor, the small food hall near the relay room, and she would stare at him with great intensity while he sat very still and tried to look cooperative. Then she would make a small sound of defeat, and he would laugh, and they would proceed with whatever they had actually come to do, which was usually to sit near each other in a comfortable way. Neera had continued her measurements, which Soli permitted because Neera's excitement about the data was its own specific pleasure. Something about watching a human get genuinely delighted by a thing was, she had decided, one of the better experiences available on the station. One afternoon, Neera looked at her screen for a very long time and did not say anything. "What?" said Soli. Neera turned the screen around. The readings looked different. Soli's face-lock attempts with Aldrich still dissipated at the consolidation point that had not changed. But what had changed was what happened around the dissipation, where before the signal had simply vanished, now there was something left behind. A faint residue, not a lock, not stored in the face-lock structures at all, but present somewhere in a different part of her empathic centers entirely. And it was slightly larger than it had been 4 months ago. "It's accumulating," Neera said. "Slowly, layer by layer. It is not a face lock. The mechanism is completely different, but something is building." Soli looked at the readings for a long time. "What is it building toward?" "I don't know yet." Neera pulled the screen back and pulled up a comparison timeline. "But it started around the time you two had your first real conversation, and it has been growing consistently since." Soli sent a formal query to Elder Savan that evening. She kept it brief. Attached data, one question, "Have you seen this before?" His response came the next morning. No, in 6,000 years of documented Velhari history, this specific pattern had never been recorded. The elders had a word for what face locking produced, a preservation. The face was kept at the moment of meeting, forever exactly as it was, perfect, static. What Soli's readings were showing was not a preservation. Savan requested a full session. Neera was invited. Director Fell sat in the back without being asked, because he usually did. The eldest elder who had come in the diplomatic shuttle had remained on the station, partly for formal reasons, and partly, Soli suspected, because he had become genuinely curious. He sat very still through Neera's full presentation, and then asked several precise questions about accumulation rate and storage structure. When the questions were done, he said, "What she is building will take years, perhaps longer. It is not face-lock speed. It is something else, something that does not overwrite itself. It keeps everything after the meeting, not just the meeting." Fell said quietly from the back of the room, "Is it permanent when it finishes?" The elder looked at him. Then he looked at Soli, who was perched on the table at the front of the room, very still, listening. "I believe," the elder said slowly, "that it will be permanent in a way our face locks are not. Face locking keeps a moment. This," he paused, selecting words carefully in a language not his own, "this keeps time." The room was quiet. Neera looked like she wanted to write 12 papers simultaneously. Fell looked at the back of Soli's head and said nothing. Soli was thinking about Aldrich's voice, the way he explained technical problems, calm and methodical, finding the simplest path through, the way he held his cup, which was different from how any of the other 344 humans held theirs. The way he had said, "That might be the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me," quietly, with the specific weight of someone who was not sure he had deserved kindness, and was still not sure what to do with it. She had none of his face. She had all of the rest of him. She left the session before it formally closed, which was slightly rude by Velhari standards, and found Aldrich in the maintenance bay. He was writing a calibration report, one hand holding a stylus, one elbow on the table, looking mildly bored in the specific way of someone doing necessary but unexciting work. He looked up when she landed on the table near him. He straightened and prepared to sit still for the ritual. Soli looked at him for a moment. Then she folded her wings and tucked her head gently against his shoulder instead. He went very still, not startled, just careful, the way he was with things he did not want to damage. After a moment, he put one hand lightly against her side. They stayed like that for a while. Neither of them said anything. There was not much to say. Something had been named without being spoken, which was, Soli had come to understand, a very human way for important things to happen. Outside the viewport, the binary stars turned slowly in their old patient orbit. Inside her, layer by quiet layer, something that had no name yet continued to build. 3 years is not very long for a Velhari. Soli's species counted time in centuries the way humans counted it in decades. Her 33 years of life made her barely past childhood by her own culture's reckoning. She had a long time ahead of her, a very long time to accumulate things. She thought about this sometimes, what she would carry, what would keep building. Helix station had changed in small ways. The promenade had been extended with a new curved section that caught the binary starlight differently in the mornings. A third canteen had opened near the science quarters because the second one could not keep up with demand. Nira had published 4 papers, 2 were currently being argued about loudly in xenobiology circles across 6 systems, which Nira considered the highest possible compliment. 359 faces now, locked and permanent. And one that was still, patiently, accumulating. Soli was on the promenade railing, the original one, the same spot from years ago, when she heard small feet stop below her. She looked down. A child, 7 years old, maybe 8, wearing the green uniform of a new family posting, the kind with the pale stripe on the shoulder that meant they had arrived within the last week. Her eyes were very wide and very fixed on Soli, with the particular look of a child who had decided to be brave about something that was actually quite large. Soli looked back at her. "Are you the dragon?" the child said, "the one who knows everyone?" "I am," Soli said. The child processed this. "Do you know me?" Soli looked at the child's face. She felt the familiar pull. The lock began and completed in under a second, warm, bright, and absolutely full of the particular fearless energy that very young humans had before the world told them to be careful, curious, bold, already looking at this strange, iridescent creature as something wonderful rather than something frightening. Locked, stored, permanent. 360. "I do now," Soli said. The child beamed. It was an exceptional beam. Soli filed the specific shape of it carefully. Then the child pointed across the promenade toward the relay corridor entrance, where Aldrich had just emerged from a morning maintenance shift. He was crouching near an open panel in the wall, tools around him, slightly rumpled, focused on something in the junction box. "Do you know him too?" the child asked. Soli looked at Aldrich for a moment. She felt, as she always did, the attempt begin, the reach, the signal moving toward him the way it always had, and then the old instruction from something very ancient inside her, "This face is not real, do not keep it," and the signal dispersed. But underneath that, in the different place, the slower place, she felt the weight of 3 years, the accumulation, his voice in 17 different moods, the way he moved when he was tired versus when he was alert, the specific exhale he made when a system read clean after a long calibration, the way he had said the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me, the way his hand had rested against her side, careful and real. "Not the way I know you," Soli said. "Not yet, but I am getting there." The child thought about this with great seriousness for a moment. "That sounds nicer, actually," she said. Soli looked at her. "Yes," she said, "I think it might be." The child's family appeared from the residential corridor and collected her, and she went with them but looked back twice. Soli watched her go. Across the promenade, Aldrich finished what he was doing, packed his tools and stood. He looked over and saw Soli on the railing. He raised 2 fingers, the same greeting Ostara used, which Aldrich had quietly adopted sometime in the 2nd year. Then he headed toward the canteen, unhurried, comfortable, present. Nira passed him going the opposite direction, almost at a run as usual, datapad in hand, and called something at Soli without stopping. Commander Ostara was doing his morning walkthrough, and he stopped near Aldrich and said something that made Aldrich smile, and then Ostara walked on looking pleased with himself in a way that meant the exchange had gone exactly as intended. Director Fell came out of the administrative corridor and stood for a moment surveying the promenade. He found Soli on the railing and gave her the small quiet nod that meant everything is fine, or at least as fine as it is going to be, which was its own kind of good news. She tilted her head in return. 360 faces, each one locked and burning clear and permanent inside her, each one a moment held in perfect stillness forever. And one face still accumulating, still growing, building itself out of time and proximity and small ordinary mornings, out of patience and conversation and the specific warmth of being near a person who had spent his whole life being slightly invisible and had not yet learned what it felt like to be genuinely seen. He would learn, she had decided. Soli spread her teal gold wings wide in the light of the promenade. The iridescent scales caught both stars at once and threw color across the floor below her in shapes that moved when she breathed. She was not neutral. She had never been going to be neutral, not with them, not with any of them, and least of all with him. Good, she thought, good. Somewhere in the Velhari archive, a new entry was being drafted that day, a formal submission from a small iridescent dragon on a human station, requesting the creation of a new word. The scholars would debate it for months. The Elder Savan would review it twice before approving. The Linguistic Council would argue over the correct root. In the end, the word they built translated roughly as follows: the memory that is not a lock but a choice, the face you did not keep all at once but gathered slowly because you decided it was worth the time. The scholars had wanted a word from the ancient Velhari root language. Soli had submitted it in human instead. She called it love.